She used her last strength to save a wolf pup from the flames. The Alpha King found her collapsing. The sun had barely risen when the village of Eldara stirred in panic. Smoke curled from the forest beyond the hills, black tendrils twisting toward the sky like fingers of some restless spirit. The wind carried the scent of burning wood and fear. The villagers ran in frantic clusters, gathering whatever belongings they could salvage, their faces pale and their eyes wide with terror. Among the chaos, a lone figure moved with urgent purpose. Alara ran through the smoke, her cloak singed at the edges, her hair clinging to her sweat-streaked face. She had seen the flames swallowing the outer forest, and in their midst, a faint cry had caught her attention, a small, desperate sound that made her heart seize. It was a wolf pup, trapped in a thicket, its tiny body trembling as fire encroached from all sides. The pup's fur was already singed, and it whimpered with fear, unable to escape the growing inferno. Alara felt her chest tighten. She knew the forest was dangerous, that no one dared enter it while the fire raged, but something inside her would not allow her to leave the creature to die. She darted forward, brushing past falling branches and scorching leaves. Every step burned her skin and lungs, but she pressed on. Her hands shook as she reached the pup, scooping it up into her arms. Its warmth was comforting against the chill of fear and smoke. She whispered softly, trying to calm both herself and the trembling animal. And then she saw it, beyond the smoke, a shadow moving like a giant among the chaos. A figure tall and broad, stepping through the fire with a kind of terrifying grace. Kaelin, the Alpha King, ruler of the northern lands and a man whose name was spoken in reverence and fear. His cloak billowed behind him, untouched by the flames, and his eyes glimmered with a sharp intensity that made the villagers scatter before him. Alara froze, instinctively clutching the pup closer. She had heard stories of him, ruthless, unyielding, and powerful beyond imagining. He was the kind of man who commanded respect with a glance, whose presence could bend the will of armies. And now, here he was, watching her as if he had seen through her very soul. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, yet carrying the weight of authority that made the trees seem to lean closer. "This fire will not forgive you." Alara's lips parted, but she could find no words. The flames crackled around her, but her fear of him was sharper than her fear of the fire. She tightened her arms around the wolf pup. I couldn't leave it," she managed to say, her voice trembling. Kaelin's eyes softened ever so slightly, though his expression remained guarded. "It is reckless, yet brave." He stepped closer, and Alara instinctively stepped back, the heat of the flames brushing against her face. "You could have died." I had to try," she whispered. Her chest heaved as smoke choked her lungs and the fire's heat became unbearable. Her knees buckled. She tried to stand, but her body refused, collapsing to the scorched ground. The pup whimpered in her arms. Before she could hit the dirt, strong hands lifted her effortlessly. Kaelin carried her as though she weighed nothing, her body limp against his chest. She felt the warmth of his armor, the steady strength of his heartbeat, and even in her fear, a strange sense of safety blossomed within her. The fire roared around them, yet Kaelin moved as if he commanded it to part. Villagers stared from a distance, awe and fear etched on their faces. No one dared approach. "You are foolish," he murmured, almost to himself, though his tone lacked anger. "Foolish and yet alive." Alara barely managed to open her eyes. I didn't want it to die," she said weakly, pressing the pup closer to her chest. Kaelin glanced down at the small creature, now calm in her arms, and then back at her. "Life is never yours to risk for another," he said quietly, almost regretfully. Then, lifting his gaze to the horizon where the smoke mingled with the clouds, he added, "But perhaps there is merit in courage, even when it is foolish." The fire had begun to die down, but the village was in ruins. Smoke hung heavy, and the smell of burning wood and fear clung to every surface. Kaelin strode through the aftermath, carrying Alara and the pup with unwavering strength. She had barely noticed the pain in her arms and legs, the blistering burns on her skin, or the trembling in her heart. They reached the edge of the forest, and Kaelin set her down gently, kneeling beside her. The wolf pup yipped happily and nuzzled her face, its small body full of trust. Alara could barely lift her head, and when she did, she saw the man's face close to hers. His eyes were sharp, golden in the light, and they seemed to pierce into her soul. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am Kaelin," he said simply, "Alpha of the Northern Lands." Alara's breath caught. She had heard the stories, but to see him in person was overwhelming. There was power in every line of his face, in every movement he made, yet she also sensed something hidden, a kind of loneliness beneath the authority, a weight she could not understand. "You," she began, but her voice faltered. She felt weak, burned, and frightened. "You saved me. I found you," he replied, his voice steady and calm. "You would not have survived otherwise." Alara tried to sit up, but her strength failed her. The fire had drained her completely, and she leaned against him, grateful despite the fear that had gripped her heart. The pup snuggled against her chest, sensing her exhaustion. Kaelin watched her for a moment longer, then stood. "Come," he commanded. "You need shelter, warmth, and healing." He carried her through the ruined village, the wolf pup tucked under one arm, and disappeared into the distance. Alara felt the weight of the day pressing down, her body aching and her mind whirling. She didn't know who this man truly was, only that he was both terrifying and fascinating. As night fell, they reached Kaelin's fortress, a towering structure of stone and shadow, perched on the cliffs above the northern forest. The walls seemed to pulse with power, and the gates opened as if expecting him. Soldiers bowed, and servants hurried to provide blankets and water, though none dared look directly at him. Alara was laid on a soft bed, still clutching the wolf pup, and for the first time she allowed herself to rest. But sleep was slow to come, her mind replaying the events of the day, the fire, the pup, and the man who had saved her life. Outside her window, the wind carried the howl of wolves. The pup stirred in her arms and yipped softly, as if answering the call. Alara shivered, realizing that she had stepped into a world far larger and far more dangerous than her simple village life. And then she heard his voice, soft but commanding, from the doorway. "Rest now. Tomorrow you will need all your strength. The flames were only the beginning." Alara's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words caught in her throat. She looked at the pup, safe for now, and understood that her life had changed forever. Somewhere deep inside her, a strange hope stirred, mingled with fear. She had risked everything for a small, helpless creature, and in doing so, she had encountered a man whose power and whose presence could not be ignored. The night passed slowly, filled with distant wolf cries and the faint hum of magic that seemed to linger in the fortress walls. Alara drifted in and out of sleep, dreams filled with fire, fur, and golden eyes watching her from the shadows. When morning came, she would face Kaelin again, and she knew, deep down, that nothing about her life would ever be the same. The morning sun glimmered off the tall stone walls of Kaelin's fortress, casting long shadows across the courtyards. Alara stirred in the soft blankets, the wolf pup still nestled against her chest. Her body ached from burns and exhaustion, but it was not only her wounds that weighed her down. Her mind raced with questions, curiosity, and unease. The fortress was alive with movement. Servants whispered hurriedly, guards paced the towers, and the air carried a faint hum, almost like the pulse of the building itself. It was not a place of comfort, yet it held a strange, magnetic order. Alara had never seen power displayed so naturally, yet she also sensed the isolation that came with it. Kaelin entered without knocking. The moment he stepped into the room, the temperature seemed to drop slightly, and the wolf pup growled softly, sensing the shift in the air. He moved closer, his golden eyes unreadable. "Rested well?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Ilara sat up slowly, brushing stray hairs from her face. I slept a little, she admitted, unsure whether to be intimidated or grateful. The wolf pup licked her hand, sensing her nervousness. You will need your strength soon, Kalen said, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The forest is not the only danger you faced yesterday. Ilara's brow furrowed. Other dangers, I thought the fire. The fire was only the first test, he interrupted gently but firmly. What comes next is older and darker than smoke and flame. There are forces in this land you do not yet understand, and the wolf pup you saved, it is part of something far greater. Ilara's pulse quickened. She had saved the pup out of instinct, out of compassion, never imagining that her small act of courage could carry meaning beyond the forest. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kalen's expression softened just for a moment before returning to its commanding severity. The pup is marked, he explained, by an ancient power tied to my lineage. If left unchecked, it could awaken a curse that has lain dormant for centuries. That is why you were here and why I found you. Ilara's heart skipped. A curse, marked by an ancient power. The words felt heavy, almost impossible to believe. Yet something in Kalen's presence, the calm authority, the golden eyes, made her feel that he spoke truth. I don't understand, she said, her fingers tightening around the pup's soft fur. Why me? Why was I the one to save it? Kalen paused, his gaze drifting toward the window where the forest stretched into misty mountains. Because you chose to act without fear, without thought for your own safety. That courage, it cannot be taught. It binds you to fate in ways you do not yet see. Ilara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a storm cloud. Courage, fate. Powers older than memory. She was just a girl who had wanted to save a small life, yet now her simple act had drawn her into a world of kings, curses, and shadowed forces. Kalen gestured for her to follow. Come, he said. There is much you must learn if you are to survive here. The fortress halls were vast, lined with tapestries depicting battles and rulers long gone. The walls seemed alive, carrying whispers of history and echoes of power. Ilara felt small, insignificant, yet strangely drawn to the grandeur of it all. She followed Kalen silently, her eyes wide, the pup clutched close to her chest. They reached a chamber filled with shelves of scrolls and books, some bound in leather, others etched with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the light. Kalen motioned for her to sit. Knowledge is power, he said. And to survive the forces gathering against this land, you must understand them. Ilara hesitated. She had grown up in a small village where books were rare and stories were passed by word of mouth. But here, in this fortress, the air itself seemed charged with history and magic. You will not remain safe here if you do not learn, Kalen continued. The curse is not just on the pup. It is linked to me, to my bloodline, and to the land itself. And there are those who would use it to destroy everything I have built. Ilara listened, her heart pounding. She had expected to be protected, to recover quietly, yet Kalen's words carried both warning and expectation. She was no longer a passive observer. She was a participant in something far larger than herself. For days, Kalen trained her, not with weapons or brute force, but in observation, patience, and understanding of the forest and its creatures. He taught her to read signs in nature, to sense subtle shifts in the air, to anticipate danger. He guided her hand as she learned to calm the wolf pup when it growled at distant shadows. Despite herself, Ilara began to notice the moments when Kalen's guard lowered, if only slightly. The brief, almost human gestures, the way he studied her while she worked, the way he allowed a faint smile when she succeeded in a task, the rare softness in his voice when he praised her courage. Yet there was always the distance, always the power he wielded like a shield. She could not forget that he was the Alpha King, feared by many, untouchable by most. She was drawn to him, despite herself, and the tension between them grew with every glance, every word left unsaid. One evening, as the sun set and the fortress was bathed in a golden glow, Kaelin summoned her to the balcony. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rivers. The wolf pup scampered at her feet, its fur gleaming in the fading light. "You have adapted quickly," Kaelin said, his voice calm yet edged with something unspoken. "Few survive here, fewer still earn my respect." Alara's cheeks flushed. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged in her throat. Instead, she nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the mountains met the sky. "There is more to you than you realize," he continued. "The courage that led you to save that pup, it is not just bravery, it is a choice, and choices have consequences." Alara's heart trembled. She had chosen to act, yet she had not known that her choice would entwine her fate with a king and a curse older than she could imagine. Before she could ask more, a sudden howl echoed through the forest. The wolf pup jumped, ears pinned back, and ran to the edge of the balcony, growling. Kaelin's expression darkened. "They know you are here," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "The enemy's waiting in shadow, they are coming. You are no longer safe, not even in this fortress." Alara's stomach tightened. She had hoped that within these walls she could find refuge. Now she realized that the fire in her village was only the first threat. She was caught in a storm of power, curses, and destiny, and the safety she had imagined was fragile. Kaelin studied her, his golden eyes piercing. "You have a choice," he said. "You may stay and learn, face what is coming and fight with me, or you may flee, but know that running will not save you. Fate has chosen its path." Alara looked at the pup, who nuzzled her hand, trusting her completely. She realized that running was no longer an option. She had been given a gift, courage, strength, a chance to act, and she could not turn away, not when others were counting on her, and not when her own heart demanded it. I will stay," she said, her voice firm despite the trembling in her chest. Kaelin nodded, though his expression remained unreadable. "Good," he said. "Then you must be ready. The forest is waking, the shadows are stirring, and the power that flows through the pup, it will demand much of you. But you will not face it alone." For the first time, Alara saw something in him beyond power and fear, a flicker of trust, almost respect, perhaps even something else, though she could not name it. The days passed in rigorous training and preparation. Alara learned to move silently through the fortress and the surrounding forest, to sense danger before it arrived, and to understand the creatures of the wild. Kaelin remained both teacher and observer, guiding her, testing her, and silently measuring her courage and resolve. But despite the lessons, there was tension in every interaction. She wanted to bridge the gap between them, to understand the man behind the legend, yet she felt the weight of his power pressing down on her. He could command armies, bend wills, and yet she glimpsed the moments of vulnerability, the rare hesitations that betrayed a heart burdened with duty and past loss. One night, as the wind howled through the cliffs, a messenger arrived with news from the northern border. A rival clan had mobilized, drawn by rumors of the pup and its hidden power. Kaelin's eyes darkened, and Alara felt the tension in the fortress spike. "They are moving faster than expected," Kaelin said, his voice low, almost reverent. "And they are not coming for conquest alone, they seek to claim the curse for themselves." Alara swallowed hard. The weight of their world pressed down upon her. She had entered the fortress as a frightened girl, clutching a small pup, yet now she stood at the center of a storm that could destroy kingdoms. Kaelin's gaze met hers, unwavering. "Tomorrow you will face your first true test," he said. "And it will not be the fire, nor the forest, nor the wolves. It will be a test of your courage, your choices, and your heart." Alara nodded, though her pulse raced. She had saved the pup once, and now she would have to confront dangers far greater than anything she had ever imagined. But deep inside, a spark of determination glimmered. She would not falter. She would face whatever came, and she would not fail, not for herself, not for the pup, and perhaps not even for the Alpha King whose presence haunted her every thought. The night was restless. Alara could feel it in her bones, a tremor beneath the fortress that seemed to echo the warning she had heard the day before. Outside, the wind carried faint whispers, and the forest's shadows pressed closer to the stone walls, as if alive with intent. The wolf pup whimpered at her side, sensing the tension in the air. Alara had spent the day preparing for what Kaelin called her first true test. She had trained tirelessly, learning to move with the wolves, to read the signs of the forest, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. Yet no lesson had prepared her for the fear she felt now, the fear that the shadows beyond the walls were not just creatures, but a darkness that sought to consume everything she had grown to care about. Kaelin appeared at her door before dawn, his presence as commanding as ever. The torchlight caught the sharp angles of his face, the golden gleam of his eyes reflecting something unspoken, concern, perhaps, or a warning she could not yet decipher. "They are close," he said, voice low and steady. "You must be ready. Remember what you have learned." Alara nodded, though her pulse raced. She had grown stronger in the fortress, yet the thought of facing the unknown sent tremors through her chest. She tightened her hold on the pup, its small body a tether to the courage she had built within herself. Together, they moved into the forest beyond the walls. The trees stretched like silent sentinels, their shadows deep and twisting under the pale light of dawn. The air was thick with mist, and every sound, the snapping of twigs, the distant howl of wolves, seemed magnified in the silence. Alara kept close to Kaelin, watching his movements, noting how he moved with confidence and precision, how his senses seemed to reach beyond what was visible. She had learned much from him, yet she knew she was still inexperienced, and the knowledge of that truth weighed heavily on her. They had walked for nearly an hour when the first attack came. Shadows leapt from the trees, shapes dark and silent, striking with unnatural speed. Alara's heart raced, but her training kicked in. She guided the wolf pup behind her, keeping it safe, while Kaelin moved like a storm, striking and dodging with lethal grace. The creatures were relentless, more than she had imagined. Her hands shook as she tried to fend them off, using the skills Kaelin had taught her, but they were fast and cunning, testing her resolve at every step. She could hear Kaelin's voice, calm yet commanding, directing her movements, and she realized how much she relied on him, not out of fear, but out of trust forged in the heat of danger. As the battle raged, Alara felt a surge of something new inside her, a fire that was not the forest, not the flames she had faced before, but a strength she had never known. She moved with purpose, anticipating the shadows, guiding the pup to safety, and striking with precision where needed. The creatures recoiled at her courage, as if sensing that she was more than they expected. But even as victory seemed within reach, a shadow larger than the rest lunged from the mist. It struck Kaelin with overwhelming force, sending him to the ground. Alara screamed, fear and determination mingling in a single cry. Without thinking, she ran to him, the wolf pup at her side, and pushed the creature back with every ounce of strength she had. Kaelin rose slowly, his expression sharp and unreadable, yet there was a flicker of approval in his gaze. "Enough," he commanded, and the shadows recoiled, melting back into the mist as if obeying an unspoken law. Alara sank to her knees, breathless, heart pounding. I didn't know if I could," she began, but Kaelin's hand on her shoulder silenced her. "You are stronger than you realize," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "But strength alone will not be enough. You must learn to trust your instincts and sometimes to let go." Alara looked at him, confusion and fear mingling with a growing respect. "Let go?" she asked. Kaelin's gaze softened just slightly. "You cannot control everything. You cannot save everyone. One day, you will have to accept that some things must be faced without certainty of the outcome." The forest fell silent again, the mist curling around their feet like the breath of spirits. Alara felt a chill, but it was not from the cold. It was the weight of understanding, the knowledge that she had stepped into a world far more dangerous than she had imagined, and that her courage would be tested in ways she could not yet see. Days passed, and the tension in the fortress grew. Messages arrived of rival clans mobilizing, of dark creatures gathering beyond the northern borders. Kalen became more distant, his attention consumed by preparations and strategy. Alara sensed the growing distance between them, and though she tried to understand it, she felt a pang of loneliness she could not name. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with fire and gold, Alara wandered the fortress alone. She carried the wolf pup in her arms, feeling its warmth against her chest. The pup had grown stronger, more confident, yet it still clung to her, sensing her fears as well as her courage. She found herself at the edge of the cliff, overlooking the forest. The wind tugged at her cloak, and the scent of pine and distant rivers filled her senses. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing heart. The events of the past days, the fire, the shadows, the battle, had changed her. She was no longer the frightened girl from the village. She was stronger, braver, and yet somehow still vulnerable. A sudden movement caught her eye. From the shadows, figures emerged, riders cloaked in dark armor, their faces hidden. Alara's heart lurched. She had not expected them so soon. She ran back toward the fortress, the pup yipping nervously in her arms. Kalen was waiting at the gates, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes glimmered with a warning she could not ignore. "They are here," he said, voice low and sharp, "and they are not alone. You must stay within the walls." Alara hesitated. "I can help," she began, but Kalen's hand raised gently yet firmly. "No," he said, "you have done enough for one day, trust me." She wanted to protest, but she knew the truth in his words. She nodded reluctantly, the weight of her helplessness pressing down on her. She realized then that trust was not easy, and it was never absolute. It was a fragile thing, built slowly, broken easily, and yet necessary. The attackers struck at night, testing the fortress's defenses, probing for weaknesses. Alara watched from a tower, her heart heavy. Kalen led the defense with precision and strength, his presence commanding loyalty and fear alike. Yet even as he fought, she noticed a shadow of pain in his eyes, a weight of responsibility she could not imagine bearing. The battle was brief but intense. The attackers retreated, leaving the fortress battered but standing. Alara descended to the courtyard, the wolf pup clinging to her side. Kalen was waiting, his expression unreadable. "You have grown stronger," he said, almost a statement rather than a compliment. "But strength alone will not save you. You must learn patience, observation, and understanding. And above all, you must learn to let go of what you cannot control." Alara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had learned much in the past days, about courage, about power, and about the complexities of the world she had entered. Yet there was still so much she did not understand. That night, as the fortress settled into uneasy silence, Alara lay awake, the wolf pup nestled against her. She thought of Kalen, of the shadows beyond the walls, and of the unknown challenges that awaited her. She realized that her journey was only beginning, and that the path ahead would test every ounce of courage, every instinct, and every choice she had. And then, from the darkness of the forest, she heard it, a howl, low and mournful, carrying a message she could not yet interpret. The pup stirred, ears pinned back, and Alara felt a chill run through her. Something ancient and powerful was stirring, and it would not wait for her to be ready. Kalen appeared at her door once more, silent as a shadow. His golden eyes held a gravity that made her heart skip. "You are ready for the next step," he said, "but it will not be easy. You may be tested in ways that will separate us, and when that time comes, you must trust yourself and the strength you have found within." Alara swallowed hard. The thought of being separated from him, even briefly, filled her with dread. Yet she understood the necessity. She had grown, and part of growing meant facing trials alone. She nodded, her hands tightening around the wolf pup. "Then I will face it," she whispered. "No matter what comes." Kalen inclined his head, the faintest flicker of something, approval, respect, or perhaps admiration, passing through his eyes. "Good," he said. "The forest and the shadows will decide what you are truly capable of. And when the dawn breaks, nothing will be the same." Alara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the words. The fortress, the pup, Kalen, and the shadows beyond. They were all pieces of a world she had only just begun to understand. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that the choices she made next would shape not only her fate, but the fate of the Alpha King and the land itself. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation. Outside, the forest stirred, the shadows deepening, the howl of wolves echoing through the cliffs. Alara held the pup close, her heart steadying with determination. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it, and she would not falter. Dawn broke over the northern forest, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. The fortress sat silently on the cliffs, its walls scarred from battles past, yet unbroken. Inside, Alara moved through the halls with steady steps, the wolf pup at her side. Her heart was heavy, yet resolute. Today, she would face the darkness that had shadowed their lives, the curse that had bound her fate to Kalen, and the enemies who had dared to rise against them. Kalen waited at the edge of the courtyard, his cloak catching the first light, his golden eyes sharp and unreadable. The past days had weighed heavily on him, the constant threat of the curse, the rival clans moving against the land, and the realization that he could not protect everyone, no matter his strength. Yet when he looked at Alara, he saw more than courage. He saw a partner in battle, a spirit that refused to break, and a heart that had grown fierce through fire and fear. "You are ready," he said, his voice steady but low. "The forest stirs and the shadows will test you both." Alara nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. "I've come this far," she replied, her hand resting on the wolf pup's head. "I won't falter now." Kalen's gaze softened for just a moment, and in that instant, Alara felt a flicker of the bond that had grown between them, the trust, the tension, the unspoken connection. It was fragile yet unbreakable, forged through fire, danger, and shared struggle. The forest awaited. Its edges were shrouded in mist, the shadows deep and twisting, carrying the weight of centuries-old magic. The wolf pup growled softly, its fur bristling as it sensed the power surrounding them. Kalen and Alara stepped into the mist, moving silently, their senses alert. The forest was alive with whispers and rustling leaves, the air thick with tension. Shadows flickered among the trees, moving with intent, testing their courage before revealing their true form. Suddenly, the curse stirred. A dark figure emerged from the fog, its eyes glimmering with a malevolent light. It was not fully creature nor fully human, but a force of the ancient magic tied to Kalen's bloodline. The wolf pup leapt forward, barking and growling, but the figure raised a hand, and the air itself seemed to push them back. Kalen stepped in front of Alara, his stance protective yet commanding. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "This will test both our strength and our hearts." Alara clenched her fists, feeling the fire of determination rise within her. She would not hide. She had grown stronger, braver, and wiser in the days past. She knew now that courage was not just about fighting, but about standing firm in the face of fear and trusting in the strength of those beside her. The dark figure advanced, its presence heavy with ancient power. Kalen met it head-on, his movements precise and deliberate, each strike pushing back the shadows with the force of his will. Yet the figure was relentless, its energy feeding on fear, testing the limits of their combined strength. Alara stepped forward, the wolf pup at her side. She reached out, connecting with the energy of the forest, the creatures, and the pup itself. She could feel the pulse of life, the power of courage, and the bond between her and Kalen. She did not attack with force alone. She attacked with understanding, with empathy, and with the unwavering determination to protect what she loved. The figure faltered, taken aback by her strength and resolve. It hissed, a sound like fire and shadow colliding, and recoiled from the wolf pup, whose small body seemed to radiate a strange, protective energy. Kalen glanced at her, surprise and admiration in his eyes. "You are stronger than I believed," he said, his voice a mix of pride and relief. Alara met his gaze, heart pounding. "I learned from the best," she replied softly, though the tension did not leave her voice. "And I learned from myself." Together they moved as one. Kalen's strength and skill combined with Alara's intuition and courage, and the shadow began to retreat. The curse, sensing the unity between them, wavered. The wolf pup's growls grew fiercer, its small body glowing faintly with the magic that had been tied to it since birth. The dark figure let out a final, mournful cry before dissolving into the mist, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the air. The forest seemed to sigh, the tension easing slightly as the shadows receded. Alara sank to her knees, breathing heavily. The wolf pup licked her hand, its eyes shining with admiration and trust. Kalen knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly, though there was a weight to his words beyond mere praise. "You faced the darkness and did not falter. You have proven yourself, not just to me but to the forest, the pup, and to yourself." Alara looked at him, seeing the depth of his emotions, relief, pride, and something she had not dared to name until now, care. The bond they had formed through fear, challenge, and shared struggle had grown into something undeniable, something powerful and real. Kalen's gaze lingered on her, and for a brief moment the authority, the command, and the power that always defined him softened, revealing the man beneath the legend. "We survived," he said, voice quiet but steady. "And together we will continue to face whatever comes." Alara smiled faintly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Together," she agreed. The days that followed were quiet but purposeful. The fortress repaired, the forest slowly returned to its calm, and the wolf pup thrived under Alara's care. Yet the bond between her and Kalen deepened, no longer solely forged by fear or necessity, but by trust, respect, and unspoken affection. They trained together, patrolled the borders, and prepared for any threats that might arise. Each day revealed more about each other. The hidden scars Kalen carried from his long years of rule, the quiet determination that had driven Alara since her village days, and the small, almost tender moments that bridged the gap between fear and friendship. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades of violet and gold, Kalen invited Alara to the cliffs above the fortress. The wind whipped around them, the wolf pup scampering happily at their feet. "You have changed," Kalen said, his voice steady yet filled with something unspoken. "Not just in strength but in heart and mind. You are no longer the girl who stumbled into the fire. You are remarkable." Alara felt her cheeks warm. "I had a good teacher," she replied softly, though she knew it was only part of the truth. Her courage, her resilience, and her choices had shaped her just as much as his guidance. Kalen studied her, golden eyes reflecting the fading light. "And yet, there is still more to face. The world is never truly calm and there will always be shadows, but you are ready and you are not alone." Alara looked out over the forest, feeling the weight of the words and the truth they carried. She had faced fire, shadows, and ancient magic. She had grown stronger, braver, and more aware of the power within herself. And beside her, Kalen remained, a constant, unwavering presence that balanced authority with care, strength with understanding. The wolf pup yipped, nudging her hand, and Alara laughed softly, feeling the joy of small victories after long struggles. She glanced at Kalen, and for the first time the unspoken bond between them felt complete, not born of fear, duty, or danger, but of choice, trust, and mutual respect. Kalen's hand brushed against hers, tentative yet confident, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we face it together." Alara nodded, the warmth of determination and trust filling her chest. "Together," she agreed, her voice strong and steady. As the last light of day faded into night, the wolf pup howled, its call echoing through the forest. The sound carried far, touching the mountains, the trees, and the winds, a reminder that courage, love, and loyalty could survive even the darkest trials. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the echoes of the past stirred, but they were no longer threats. They were reminders that the choices made with courage and heart could shape the future, even in a world where kings, curses, and shadows held power. Alara and Kalen stood side by side on the cliff, the wind at their backs, the fortress behind them, and the forest stretching endlessly before them. They had faced the darkness, confronted the curse, and survived trials that would have broken lesser hearts. But they had done so together, and together they had forged a bond stronger than fear, stronger than power, and stronger than any shadow that might rise again. The night sky was full of stars, the moon casting silver light on the forest below. The wolf pup nestled at their feet, content and safe. And for the first time since the fire, Alara felt a deep, steady peace in her heart. Their journey was not over, and the world would continue to test them. But in that moment on that cliff with the wind singing through the trees, they knew one truth above all. They were no longer alone. They were together, and that was enough.